Hi, welcome to Repetition and Contrast, where we provide tools for creative entrepreneurs. I'm Alan, and today I want to talk about the collect. I'm saying that in a way that's a little bit of a personal joke, an inside joke. The collect is a liturgical term. I've done a bunch of church work. When I was young, I was very involved in the church. And when I got into my 20s, I left the church for a decade. And then I got wrangled into coming back to church and decided that when the church is doing the work of the church, it does a great job when it's focused on, charitable acts, and when it's focused on community. It does beautiful things. I think that I got I found myself in a place where I was less excited about the church in my 20s because the kinds of churches I had been going to were focused on the idea that the people in the church were better than other people, as opposed to trying to be servants of other people. And I think that that's a problem. But that's beside the point today. The point today is about the collect. In liturgical terms, a collect is an opening prayer that sets the mood for everything that you're about to do. And I think that that's kind of funny in relationship to getting organized and becoming the kind of organized creatives we need to be in order to get into our flow state regularly, like I discussed last week. Because can I please get organized? It's sort of a prayer too, right? So one of the big things that I encounter with creatives whenever I start talking about this idea of needing to get creative, or needing to get organized, is creatives get frustrated about this idea. Creativity, by its very nature, creates people who are disorganized, and I think that a lot of us get frightened when we are thinking about it in terms of, okay, that person over there is not organized and they're very creative. That person over there is organized. They are not creative. And so we think that these things are intrinsically linked, and we get it in our head that way. But what I'm going to tell you is that throughout time, the greatest creatives were in fact very organized. And they may have frustrated people who were their superiors or people that thought of themselves as over those creatives. Bach comes to mind right now. But the people who were organized are the ones who had some amount of success during their own lifetimes, as opposed to the ones that were disorganized, where you found this huge body of work way after they died, and it became important at that point, So I'm encouraging you to say, number one, we need to get organized so we can experience all the success life has for us. And the other thing that I'm going to try to encourage you with is this idea that you will not lose your creativity from getting organized. It will actually make you more creative. I promise. Getting organized is about lowering stress. It's not about adding stress. In a nutshell, the more organized we are, the more we're able to see into the future, the more we're able to get prepared for things, the more we are able to deal with the things that are happening in the moment with clear minds. And that's really my hope for you and what I want you to accomplish. The reason that we have to go to the level of extreme that I'm about to show you for getting organized over the next few videos is really because the world has changed. Our jobs keep changing as creatives. I was talking to a friend of mine who's like an old school comic book guy in his 60s a few days ago. And I said something to him to this effect, and he was like, man, that's not true. All the people that I admire drew comic books for 50 years and never had to adjust anything about what they did. And that's true. At one point in time, the mid 20th century, it was really easy to just do the same thing over and over and over again and make a living. But that time has passed. The few people that still exists for are the rare individual, or people who don't have the initiative to make any more money than what they're making. And hey, man, if you are happy with the amount of money you're making, I am happy for you. Um, but what I'm trying to do is figure out better ways of making money. I'm going to talk about a bunch of the ways that my creative life has changed over the decades and different things that I've done in order to make money as we get into it. But the beginning of all of it is getting organized. Now, I'm going to be as straightforward with you as I possibly can be. There are elements of my life that are not organized that I'm working on getting organized. I think that in terms of broad strokes, I've done a really good job of following the ideas from these 3 books. But the problem for me has been that I've needed to translate what the people who wrote these 3 books wrote for a solo creative entrepreneur. These books are really more for business executives or people who live in some sort of corporate lifestyle, as opposed to people who are trying to be solo creative entrepreneurs. And but all of the ideas I'm going to present to you are either from these books or ideas that have worked for me as a result of me taking the ideas from these books and modifying them. But I also want to make sure that you read these books, man. They're awesome. Getting Things Done by David Allen is probably the pinnacle of stress-free productivity in concept. In fact, many pieces of software that you'll purchase to help you get organized will say things like they're GTD compliant. And that's what they're referring to as this book, Getting Things Done. So Getting Things Done has had a huge impact on everyone in all markets. And I can't recommend this book enough. Atomic Habits, I read actually fairly recently. And what I realized for it is that it is possibly one of the best books for someone like my daughter. I mentioned my daughter in previous videos. She's just about to turn 14, and she is as smart as they come and as creative as they come, but she is also as disorganized as they come. And what I love about Atomic Habits is it's this idea of trying to help you find productivity in whatever field that you're trying to be productive in by setting up sticks and carrots for yourself just in the way that you live, and I think that is incredibly beneficial. Making ideas happen is sort of the GTD for creatives. But again, it's really aimed more at people who are in larger corporate environments. It tries to pretend like it's for solopreneurs, but it really isn't. So I'm going to translate some of its ideas as well. But it's the one that's closest to feeling like it is a productivity book for people who are creatives. So I highly recommend it. The challenge is that we need to put everything in its place. And specifically what I'm referring to, more so than things, although having a clean workspace is awesome. The real thing that I'm referring to here when I'm talking about having everything in its place is I'm talking about lists of things you have to do. Because here's the deal. If you are constantly trying to remember that thing you're supposed to be doing, as opposed to having it written down in a place that you can trust, where these are the things I have to do, and I'm just going to reference it as I go. What happens to me, and I think what happens to most people, is sometimes that works out fine. Assuming I have a limited number of things that I'm doing, it's all fine. But the moment that I have a lot of work to do, I forget things. Or I remember them at really, really inopportune times. This actually just happened to me the other day. I was supposed to jump on and record a podcast for a client, and I forgot about it because I didn't write it down. And and about 20 minutes into when the podcast was supposed to be happening, I suddenly remembered and had to get to it. Now, if I have everything I'm supposed to be doing in a day written down, that never happens to me. I always start chunking through the stuff I'm supposed to be doing in fairly effective ways. If I have things written down and I can go, okay, what's the next thing I got to do? I enter the flow state for the thing I got to do because I'm not thinking about anything else except the thing I got to do. By the way, that's going very badly in this particular recording because I have a client in another state who's working on some technical things, and it's a client that I have relinquished. I've given them to somebody else, but we still have a little bit of a transition phase going on, and so they are calling me while I'm trying to shoot this video to ask me tech support questions about how to make things happen. And so if this thing gets a little choppy, you'll know why now. So anyway, we're trying to put everything in its place in terms of writing things down. A lot of what I'm going to go over are just tips and tricks. A lot of that will be useful for you in terms of figuring out how to get organized. My best recommendation is that you set aside some time to get started. By some time to get started, I mean a big chunk of time where you won't be distracted. A lot of people that go through the process of collecting everything that they need to get organized, if it's the first time especially, it takes them hours or sometimes days. I've even seen some people where it took weeks. And the last thing I'm going to say is that you also want to set up your workspace, whatever kind of workspace that is, so that it's conducive to doing this kind of work. And I'm going to do a whole video about setting up your workspace in the future. So I'm going to leave that alone right now. But as a really, really broad stroke kind of statement, what I'm going to say is this. The more your workspace is set up for you to be able to work, instead of you having to come to your workspace and then get set up to work, the easier it is for you to work. This is an atomic habits idea. If I can sit down and start working, I have a tendency to sit down and start working. But if I have to sit down and spend 15 minutes getting set up, spending that 15 minutes to get set up is a deterrent to me starting to work in the first place. And so I will procrastinate spending those 15 minutes to get set up to start working for the day as long as I can possibly do it. And that is the reason that you need to be cognizant of your workspace. And when I'm talking about workspace setup, that's really more of what I'm talking about than, your workspace being free from clutter or cables or whatever. I would love to have a workspace free from clutter, and I get there in between projects. What happens to me is I'll be working on a project, things will get cluttered during the project, and then at the end of the project, I'll do like a cleanup phase where everything gets reorganized. And to be honest with you, until I get to the end of a project, things are not terribly clutter-free. But the clutter that's around me are usually the things that I need for that project. And then when I get to the end of it, everything gets cleaned up, and then I start the next project, and then things gradually get cluttered again. But we'll talk about that in a future video. Okay, there are 5 stages of getting your life together. This is from Getting Things Done. I have renamed a couple of these to call it the collect, process, organize, review, do. I don't think he uses the word collect. I think he uses, I don't remember what he says, but it's some other word. But I like collect all the things that you need to process. Okay, so when I say that you're collecting things, what I mean is this. You are making a giant list of everything that you need to do. And this includes should, ought, and need. And a lot of times you might have, random Post-it notes around where you've been writing these things down, or you might have projects that you have intended to do with friends or clients or family members. You might have a honey-do list. You know, maybe your wife or significant other or girlfriend, boyfriend has told you some things they would like for you to do that you haven't gotten around to yet. Um, this could include all of the giant things that you want to do. You know, I want to write my 10 novel series, or I want to draw those 3 graphic novels, or I want to record those albums, or whatever it is. Or it might just, you know, man, I need to learn how to play the mandolin. You don't even know what is involved in getting started. Whatever things that you have floating around in your head that you should, ought to, or need to do are the things that you are going to write down in this particular situation. There are a bunch of ways that you can collect things. You can put them in sort of a physical basket. You can use notepads. You can use electronic note taking devices. The Mac actually has a notepad with a built-in checklist feature that I've used in some cases with great success. My favorite electronic note-taking software is something called OmniFocus. You can use voice recording devices. I know a lot of people who swear by them, where they basically have like some sort of dictation app in their phone or whatever, and they record notes to themselves. That does not work for me, by the way, in any way. But I know some people who swear by it. And straight up email. What I do with email is if someone sent me an email for something I need to do, I do not file it away till it's done. And then when it's done, I archive it. And right now I'm definitely not at basket zero for my email, but I'm certainly not hundreds or thousands of emails in my inbox. My inbox in my email is only for things that have not gotten completely finished yet. And so it's probably a couple dozen items right now. But the point I'm making is that you need to write down everything that you need to do to get it out of your head. If it's no longer in your head and it's written down in a trusted place, it's not going to prevent you from getting to the flow state. And that's really what we're trying to do right now, is write down everything so that we can get to that flow state easier. And that makes us work more efficiently. It makes us work in a way where we're free from distraction. And then we can actually zone out and zone into the thing that we're trying to do or make. All right. A couple of side notes here. You should minimize the number of places that you are collecting things. So in other words, I have 2 master collection methodologies, and then I have a third one that I probably shouldn't have, in all honesty, but it worked for me for a time, and I go in and out of it working. But here's the deal. I have OmniFocus, and it's where I write down all of the long-term projects. Technically, OmniFocus is designed for me to be able to also figure out what I'm doing right now this week. But I have found it to be less efficient for that for me because of the way that it requires me to add dates to it. And what I found works for me is to use OmniFocus as a way for me to collect everything, and then a notepad to sort of organize what I'm going to do, this today and this week. And what I'm really doing is I'm going to OmniFocus to remind me of all the big things that I got to do. And then I'm breaking it down into really, really, really small chunks on the to-do list. And when I say really small chunks, what I mean is this. When you're collecting things that need to be done, there are 2 rules I want you to follow as a creative. The first rule I want you to follow is that if it can be done, this is, by the way, this rule is from Getting Things Done. This is David Allen's rule. If the thing you collect can be done in less than 2 minutes, do it. Don't write it down, because that's one less thing you have to write down. So the rule is if it takes less than 2 minutes, just do it, get it out of the way. My rule, what I'm adding to this is anything on your master to-do list can't take more than 90 minutes. Okay, 90 minutes is my idea. Let me tell you why. And then you can adopt it or reframe it however you want to. Here's the thing, man. If I put something on my to-do list like draw a graphic novel, which is going to take me a year or 2 years of my life, okay, that is not an easy check mark. Like there's a little dopamine hit whenever you check something off of that to-do list, and that one isn't useful or helpful. It's too big of a thing that must be done in order to get you rolling in this process. So when you collect things, in the process of collecting things, what I want you to do is I want you to break things down into smaller chunks. So if the goal is to draw a graphic novel, what I want you to do is I want you to break it down into chunks. Write the first 8 pages of the graphic novel. Write pages 9 through 16 of the graphic novel. Write pages 17 through 24 of the graphic novel, so on and so forth. Maybe before you even do that, it's write a vague outline for the graphic novel. Next step, refine outline for the graphic novel. Now you're getting into writing pages. Once you're finished, once you have a list of all the pages that need to be written, that can be written in about a 90-minute chunk. And by the way, I think that you can write vague outlines for 8 pages of a graphic novel in a 90-minute chunk, because that's what I do. I'm not saying that's what you do. Maybe you need to write it 1 page in 90 minutes, or whatever works for you. Then I'm going to say layouts. So I can probably do a layout for a page when I'm doing a graphic novel. I can probably do layouts for a page in about, what do you think, about 30 minutes or something? 20 to 30 minutes. So I will say I'll put it in 2-page chunks, so less than 90 minutes, not exactly 90 minutes, less than 90 minutes. So I might say, and for that matter, just because it's less to do, I'm thinking in 30-minute chunks, fine. So design page 1, design page 2, design, or layouts for page 1, layouts for page 2, layouts for page 3, so on and so forth. Then I'll make a list that says, pencils or refined drawings or whatever for the first half of page 1, second half of page 1, first half of page 2, so on and so forth. Then I'm going to make a list that says, inks for, page 1. I might even say half of page 1 or a fourth of page 1, depending on how complicated of a page it is, until I get to the point where, so hopefully you're getting this idea that doing a massive project like this is a whole bunch of things. You might even need, for a graphic novel, you might need something like a design logo. You might need some in your to-do list. You might need something like design for print, design for webtoons. All of these are different tasks that have to be accomplished through the process of making something that massive, and you need to break it down into shorter chunks. Now, why 90 minutes? Human brain works in 90-minute chunks. When you are sleeping, wake up, at least nominally, every 90 minutes. This is, research that's been going around for decades. 90 minutes on, 15 minutes off, 90 minutes on, 15 minutes off is kind of the way I do my workday. But you need to notice your own creative habits and tailor the way that you organize your materials based on your creative habits. So how long are you working at a stretch before you need a break? Side note, I didn't used to take breaks. When I got my first novel cover illustration job, right out of art school, I was gonna knock this out of the park, and I was gonna work on it so hard, and I was doing all this stuff. Anyway, I must have drawn on this thing for a week, every day, hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And somewhere near the end of that week, because I was stressed out the entire time trying to make perfect marks, and whatever. And something like snapped in my wrist, and it just stopped working, and I could barely move the pin around, man, and it was terrible. And it didn't come back. It didn't start working again. And about a week later, I went to an orthopedic doctor who I told the story to. And so he did a bunch of tests, like he did some x-rays and some, what do you call them, CAT scans and stuff. And basically after running all these tests, he comes back in his office and he says, "Hey man, I can't find anything wrong with your arm. Can you tell me more about what you're doing when it hurts?" And I say, "Well, it's when I'm drawing." And he says, "Okay, how long are you drawing when it hurts?" And I'm like, "I don't know, 10, 11 hours. And he says, "How many breaks are you taking?" And I said, "Breaks." And he kicked me out of his office. So anyway, what I'm trying to communicate to you is that you need breaks, and you need to be smart about the way you're working. And it's difficult to be smart about the way you work until you've worked a bit, and you figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. What works for me, 90 minutes on, 15 off. I try not to do legit production work more than about 8 hours a day. And a lot of times I'll do, practice stuff or fun stuff or whatever after that. But that's the idea. Okay. My last thought for this video is I want to say one thing about to-do lists that might fly in the face of things that you've heard previously. And here's what it is. By the way, this is from Getting Things Done by David Allen. And I'm modifying it just a little bit for me. When you write a to-do list, I don't want you to put dates on anything that you can live without a date on. Like, for instance, that podcast thing I had to do the other day, there was only one time when that could happen, and it was at 11 a.m. on Thursday. And so that needed to have a date on it and a timestamp. This is when this has to be done. But when I say, design page 25 of my current graphic novel, I don't have a timestamp on that. And the reason I don't is because I just want to see an ordered list of things that have to be done for the graphic novel, ordered meaning in order. And what I want to do is when I have finished something, I want to check it off. That gives me in my head the freedom to work ahead. Oh, this thing's due, but it's not due right now. It also sets me up to where if I don't get enough work done on it this week, I don't have to go back and change all those due dates. Oh, I missed 50 due dates. I got to change them all now. That is a huge time suck, changing all those due dates. That does not work. Having to change due dates does not work. So when you're making a to-do list, make sure that you are leaving all of your to-do dates off of it, unless it has to happen at a specific time. All right. Okay. So by the time I see you next time, I hope you have collected all of this information for all the things that you should, ought to, or could do. And I can't wait to tell you about the next phase in the process of getting organized.